Hello and welcome to another episode of Autogefühl with me, AJ. Today I'm here in Barcelona on a windy day, and next to me is the all-new Seat Ibiza. Why is it all new? Well, this car debuts the new VW's MQB A0 platform. This platform will also be used for the upcoming VW Polo, as well as the Skoda Fabia, and even the Audi A1. Furthermore, this platform will also be used to develop new small SUVs, including the Seat Arona, which is coming out later this year. Not only that, the new Ibiza gets some additional safety features as well as new technology. So join us today as we test this car on road to see what it's got. Are you interested? Come on, let's go. Here at the front, I think the new Seat Ibiza looks very similar to the Leon, or at least the Leon of the previous generation. I say that because these headlights, the daytime running lights of the LED lights, are still triangular, whereas the new generation Leon has an extra edge and an angle in the middle. But apart from that, there's so many design lines, again very Seat-like. We have a very thick design line over here, which tapers off and fades away down towards the headlights. Another softer design line up here, and as we go towards the middle of the hood, there's a big power dome, and rightfully so, because this being the FR, we also have the 1.5 Evo TSI. I'll talk more about that engine later on. As we go further down here, like I mentioned, the LED daytime running lights, as well as this is the optional full LED light package. This is still an option even on the top FR and Excellence trims. It doesn't come standard there either. But as we go further up down here, you see there's a lot more angular lines and a black finish for the fog lamps. Looks very sporty. I really like it. A wide grille with the border of shiny chrome effect plastic. A large Seat logo in the middle, and the FR badging for the Formula Racing FR trim level. And finally, as we go down here, we have the radar sensor for the adaptive cruise control. So let us know, what do you think about this design? Does it look very similar to the Leon, or does it still retain its own Ibiza characteristics? The new MQB A0 platform is shorter than before, so the new Ibiza is shorter by a couple millimeters, but the width has increased. Consequently, the track of the wheels has also increased. Then the wheelbase itself has also increased, so the wheels are now at the complete corners of the car, as well as the actual diameter, the size of the wheels have also increased. So this makes the car a lot more planted and a lot more stable. The length is about 4 meters long, that's about 13 feet. It's about 1.7 meters wide, that's about 5 feet 6 inches. And the car weighs about 1,100 kilograms, which is roughly the same amount that it was before, but it's a lot more stiffer. And it's a lot more spacious on the inside because of the clever packaging with the wheels at the full corners. Now here on the FR, because it's this more sporty variant, we have 18-inch wheels. They have a black and shiny silver dual tone scheme with the Seat logo in the middle. And another thing I want to mention is, as you'll see, you have disc brakes in the front. That's obvious, all the cars will have disc brakes. But the Ibizas with the smaller engines below 100 horsepower will have drum brakes at the rear and only disc brakes at the front. Anyway, as we continue down the side, you will see the trademark Seat crease, this design line, which starts off at the front and then slowly tapers off and fades away in the rear door. And the other opposing design line from the back steps in and meets it a little bit higher than the first design line. Again, with the FR, you have some side skirts, some front bumpers, and a rear diffuser that I'll show you a little bit later. And finally, you have a black mirror. Now let's take a look at the back. I think here is where the biggest change is. I think the Ibiza looks a lot more different and fresh, as well as different from the other existing Seat cars. The center design line really emphasizes the width of the car, as well as providing really nice contrast in the light region on the top, as well as the shadow region on the bottom. Everything above this line tapers this way, and everything below this line again tapers this way. So I think it adds a different touch, and I quite like that. Towards the middle, we have the Seat logo, which doubles as a latch to open the rear hatch. We have the Ibiza badging as well. A large lip for the lower bumper, which houses the parking sensors as well as the reversing camera. And finally down here, here's where I get a little bit upset, because these are fake exhausts. There's nothing behind them. Although they look nice, you know, at least because this is the 1.5 Evo TSI engine, I was hoping they would be real exhausts. But the truth is, even companies like Mercedes have fake exhausts and people don't seem to really care, so maybe it's just me. What do you think? Let's take a look under the hood, shall we? So the Seat Ibiza currently only comes with two petrol engine options. The 1.0 MPI, which is a naturally aspirated 3-cylinder petrol engine, which makes 75 horsepower. Then there is the 1.0 Eco TSI, which is a 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine. You can get this in the tune of either a 95 horsepower or with 115 horsepower. Right now, these are the only options available, and they only come with the 6-speed manual. But later this year, you can also option the DSG for the 115 horsepower engine. There will also be a 1.6 diesel, the TDI, and even a natural gas engine. And finally, you will also be getting this, what we have in the test car. This is the 1.5 Evo TSI. This is the new engine for the Volkswagen range. A very interesting engine. We'll talk more about it in detail. But what I can tell you right now is it makes 150 horsepower. It has cylinder shutoff. It has variable geometry turbo. It has even a variable compression ratio. So we'll check out how these things work. We can also watch the review of the VW Golf facelift that Thomas has done already, where that engine was present in the test car that he drove. So you can also compare, how the engine behaves in that car as well as how it behaves in this car. Here we have the key, but our car gets the optional push button start, so you don't really need this, you can keep it in your pocket. The door opens really wide, you have a big opening, nice large window area at the top. Materials up here unfortunately are a bit hard, but this is a Seat Ibiza, so it's not really going to be very premium materials. Materials down here are pretty soft, that's nice because you keep your elbow here, so it's a little bit padded. There's an interesting panel of piano black plastic, and interestingly it doesn't leave any fingerprints, which is a good thing. And more than that, down here, if you can see it, it also has LED lighting, again, which we've seen in the other Seat cars. It's nothing new. So you can change the color to, depending on your mood. On the inside, it's very sporty, very black. Of course, you can choose different colors and different trims. There's a whole host of personalizations in terms of, you can change the color of the floor mats, the stitching, you can change the color on the doorknob, the gear knob and the steering wheel. Lots of interesting stuff. Let's hop inside and take a closer look. All right, the car is a bit lower, but getting inside is not too bad. And of course, this low down, hunkered down seating position also makes it feel a lot more sporty. There's a nice place down here to drop your key. We have the optional Alcantara pack for the seats. So there's Alcantara in the middle and leatherette on the sides. You also get some detailed red stitching along the edges to give it that extra touch. That's also there on the handbrake and the stalk of the gear lever. So let's start off from this side. So the air vents are pretty high, and I've noticed while driving that they blow air pretty much onto my hands when they're on the steering wheel. Visibility of this car is also really nice thanks to the new MQB A0 platform. All the wheels are pushed to the complete corners of the car, and it's very cleverly packaged, so there's a lot of interior space even at the back, and I'll show you that later on. But it's also important to note that the Ibiza is now only available as a 5-door body type. You don't get a 3-door, nor do you get the Estate that you used to get before. The new Arona will be the only other option per se that you have in this platform. So now let's take a look at the steering wheel. We have a flat bottom steering wheel. It's very sporty, nice grip, and you have indentations for your thumb. It has the FR logo in the bottom. It's fairly small, but that again, I think enhances the sportiness of this car. You have your light and indicator stalk on the left, the adaptive cruise control stalk as well below that, and your the windshield wiper stalk here as well. And let's fire up the car. On the dashboard you have a large tachometer on the left and a speedometer on the right. There's also a small screen in the middle which gives you useful information such as your speed, your navigation, so it tells you when you have to take the next exit. You can control your audio, very basic functions like that. I'll show you that later on, I can't do it right now. And overall, the truth is I don't think it's very different. There isn't anything that's special as such about the Ibiza. It feels very much like the Seat Leon or the Seat Ateca, and even perhaps the other VW Group cars. And it does show that this is a little bit more cheaper in the price range when you compare to the rest of the VW Group. For example, the plastics up here are also really hard and brittle. Even the plastics here are hard, which I've noticed is quite uncomfortable because when you're driving on long distances, your knee tends to rest on this, and because it's quite hard, it starts hurting here. And even, things like plastics down here, which are really loose and, sharp edged. But overall, it has what you need, just what you need and not more else. And because of that, it's able to offer you a good price. You even get things like an adjustable steering wheel. The seat can also be adjusted for height and reclining, all the usual stuff. There's also plenty of cubby holes. There are big bins on the doors. So we have a couple beverage holders, a center armrest with a deep cubby hole. Let's give it the shake test. Pretty solid. Also goes front and back. Place to keep your phone with an inductive charger. So let's take a look at the center console. Down here we have the 6-speed manual shifter. Has a nice feel. The throws are fairly short and positive. It's not as crisp or as tight feeling. It's still a bit loose around the edges, but more on that later on. Over here we have the door lock button auto shut off, drive mode selector. Again, because this is just a manual, drive mode selector basically alters things like the steering weight and feel, as well as the throttle response. And over here you have a button to turn on and off your parking sensors. And finally, over here you have the engine start-stop button that you get in the FR. And like the Leon that we've seen earlier in the other Seats, the light behind it pulses to mimic a heartbeat. And finally down here you have the inductive charger, and this also has a GSM amplifier, so when your phone is connected it will amplify the signal, so you always have network. Couple USB ports, an auxiliary, and finally up here you have your climate control. Again, very standard, automatic climate control, or you can change the fan speeds manually, dual zone temperatures, defoggers, vent control, and seat heaters. Now let's take a look at the infotainment system. This is the new 8-inch touchscreen, very similar to the one that we've seen in the Skoda Octavia, the new one. And this is the first Seat to get this actual system. In the lower trims you can spec this as an option, except for the reference where you only get the black and white. This car also gets the optional Beats audio system, which sounds pretty good. And another cool feature about this infotainment system that we know from before is that when you bring your hand up close, the menu automatically comes up and you can access the main menu from there. And you have a very familiar layout that we've seen previously in other Seats. Things like your radio, connecting your media, and the navigation, which is really good. Again, very similar to the rest of the VW range. The knob on the right, in this case, can be used to zoom in and zoom out, which is very useful because I really don't like trying to pinch and zoom while driving. It can be very distracting. You have voice command as well, which you can activate from the steering wheel or with this button. So you can give commands such as enter navigation, call so and so, change the radio station, the usual stuff. The other hot links on the side, for example, are for the radio and the media, the telephone, the navigation, the full link, your vehicle status, and to jump to the main menu. You can also get live traffic updates if you have the service installed, store some images, connect your phone. And here in the vehicle status, like I showed you earlier, you can also spec the tire pressure indicator, and it gives you just a general status about which doors are open. And you have several settings, including, for example, background lighting, so you can change the brightness of these LED strips in the door panels and under the footwells. You don't have too many color choices like we've seen in the Leon or the Ateca. You just have red and white, and you can obviously turn it off if you don't want that. Parking and maneuvering, so you have the park pilot as well as a reversing camera, and just general things that you've already seen. Of course, the new Ibiza, as part of its upgraded security and safety system, also gets an advanced electronic stability control program, and that's obviously best to leave it activated. And finally, we have the full link system, which basically means you can connect your phone with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. When the system is turned off, you have several options to have different clocks. But another thing you will notice is, because this is so glossy, the screen, after a couple hours of usage, it leaves so many fingerprints. Now let's take a look at the small display in the dashboard. So we have several options, as you can see. There's telephone, so you can connect your phone with Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. You have a vehicle status. It tells you your tire pressure warning and things like that, for example. And we get more assistance systems like front assist, so this will detect pedestrians or cars in front of you using the radar from the adaptive cruise control and automatically apply the brakes. And you obviously have your navigation. So when there's no route being programmed, it just gives you a compass. But when there is a route, it'll tell you the upcoming exits. Then there's your audio controls and driving data. Here you can see your speed, your oil temperature, things like that. And so far, as you can see, we've been getting an average consumption of about 7.2 liters for 100 kilometers. All right, let's hop into the back seat. The door opens fairly wide, although it's quite small. And again, because this car is fairly low down, you kind of have to stoop to get inside, but it's not too bad. But once you're inside, it gets pretty good, because as you can see, I have plenty amount of knee room, and if I sit up straight, I have plenty of headroom. This seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'8" or 1.7 meters. So definitely this new platform with the extended wheelbase and the wider track has a much more spacious cabin. There's also a pouch in the seat back, which has some felt lining, so you can put your phone or your iPad or books and things like that. But unfortunately, as you can see, there's a very large and very tall central transmission tunnel. You have ISOFIX points for the child seats on the outside two seats. Unfortunately, there is no armrest. And again, the material of these seats are the same as the ones we saw in the front, with Alcantara as well as fake leather, but we don't have any red stitching along the seams. Now let's see if I can fit into the middle seat. Well, honestly, the seat is not too bad. It's fairly soft, fairly supportive, fairly comfortable. And if your co-passengers are willing to share their footwells with you, then yeah, for short journeys, 3 people could sit here at a pinch. Now let's take a look at the boot. A very large and wide opening, very usable. It's so easy to load things. You can easily remove the parcel shelf and put it away. Of course, there's no place to keep it. And this is a false floor, so you can move this down if you want to get more space. But in that case, the loading lip becomes really, really high. And of course, you can split the seats in a 60-40 fashion. And in this case, it doesn't lay flat, but if you have the floor up here, then it does. So with the seats up, the Seat Ibiza gets 355 liters of boot space, which is quite amazing for a car in this segment. All right, now let's take a spin in the all-new Seat Ibiza. First off, we're gonna go for a spin around the city, because after all, this is a small car and the city is probably the place where it's going to be used the most. But of course, as we'll see later on, this car can also do long distances on the highway really well. So first things first, well, the visibility is really good, even though the seating position is quite low. Thanks to the more spacious cabin with the tall windows and the big windscreen, it still feels really bright and airy, and you can see where the cars are coming, and you can see, you know, overall general visibility is really good. In the 1.5 Evo engine that we're driving, I'll talk more about that later, but we get the cylinder shutoff as well as a variable geometry turbo, so there is much less turbo lag now. And when you're crawling along in the city and there's very little load, then you can see that you're going on only 2 cylinders, and it even coasts. So it's very smooth, and it helps give you, it helps achieve better economy. On the other hand, the suspension is supple enough so that bumpy city streets are no problem at all for this car. You can, you know, it soaks in the bumps and it's no problem. Let me just get around this bus really quick. There's quite a lot of traffic today in Barcelona. It's a Saturday, so, and it's already summer now, so But this car fits right in this city. I think it has a lot of the same personality, and I can see a lot of resemblances with that. The steering wheel again is really light, especially in the eco mode or in the normal mode. It's lighter than the sport mode. So in the city, when you want to make quick corrections or take right-hand turns or left-hand turns, it's much easier to do that. It's very light. The throttle response in the eco mode is a little bit dull, so it helps provide a smoother control of the throttle. The clutch is also quite light, so when you have to keep modulating between the clutch and the throttle, it's a very smooth operation. Apart from that, you have an armrest on the right as well as an armrest on the left, so it's again very comfortable. The sound insulation is also really good, so you don't hear the noisy traffic around you. And overall, I think this car does really well in the city. With the 1.5 TSI Evo, there's a lot of torque in this engine, so when you're ambling around in city like this in traffic, you can leave it in second gear and you don't have to worry about changing gears that often until you come to a stop. And also, it switches from the 2-cylinder mode to the 4-cylinder mode quite seamlessly, so you don't feel any change. There's not a sudden surge or any kind of nodding of the engine or the car, so it's fairly smooth. Apart from that, the GPS, while it's easy to see and the graphics are pretty good and it's quite smooth, the problem is that sometimes the instructions on your dashboard doesn't necessarily react as quick as you would want it to. And at times you end up taking the wrong exit or getting lost because it's not quick enough. But otherwise, I think it's pretty okay. And another thing I noticed while we've been driving around in the city is that although the positive side of having a wider track and a longer wheelbase, it means that there's more space inside the car, when you want to make a 3-point turn or a really tight U-turn, it's a bit tricky because the turning circle or the turning radius has now increased a little bit. So, I guess you win some and you lose some. Anyway, now let's take this car out onto the highway and see what it does there. How is the Seat Ibiza on the highway? Really well, actually. It handles it really well. Because of the lower center of gravity, thanks to the lowered ride height, as well as the width and the wheelbase, it's a much more planted and much more stable car than before. And because of that, it really feels so much more grown up, so much more similar to the Leon, in fact. And on the highway, that really shows. It's very stable, it doesn't get upset by crosswinds or undulations on the road that easily. It is a little bit louder than I would have liked, perhaps. It's not as well insulated as some of the other cars, perhaps like the Volkswagen Polo. But on the whole, it's still fairly comfortable. And speaking of comfort, well, these seats are also really nice. Even though they're the sportier Alcantara pack, they're very supportive. And they're soft enough so that you can do long distances in, but not so soft that it gives you a backache. To add to this comfort, you also have the adaptive cruise control, so you just set the speed and set the distance that you want it to maintain with the car in the front. And even if you change down in the gear or so, it still doesn't deactivate, so it's very useful. And the way it operates is also very smooth. It's very gentle. It's not too intrusive. Suppose the car in front slows down, it doesn't suddenly hit the brakes too hard or anything. It's a much more gradual operation. So I like that. Now we are driving the 1.5 Evo TSI. This is the new VW engine. It has 150 horsepower. It's a 4-cylinder turbo petrol engine. Now, what's special about this engine? Well, it's an upgraded version of the previous 1.4 TSI. It does pretty much everything that the 1.4 does, and it does it better. In an age where all companies are downsizing engines, it's good to see Volkswagen making an engine a little bit bigger and a little bit more powerful. So what is special about this engine? Well, first of all, it has a variable compression ratio. What that basically means is it can run on a Miller thermodynamic cycle, for those of you who know what that is. So at high temperatures and high loads, the engine doesn't need to maintain such a high compression ratio. So in order to increase efficiency and power, what this engine does is during the compression stroke, when this piston is going up in the cylinder, the intake valve is open ever so slightly for a very short duration. So it lets some of the pressure escape back into the intake manifold. So when it needs to do this, it will do this, and it really helps improve efficiency. Another thing that it has to improve efficiency is cylinder shutoff. So when you're on full load and you're accelerating, or if there's a lot of weight, or you're going uphill, then all 4 cylinders will be firing. But when you're cruising on the highway in the 6th gear, like right now, I don't know if you guys can see, but you can, every now and then, a little symbol called ECO pops up, which shows that only 2 cylinders are firing. So the middle 2 cylinders and the 4-cylinder engine are completely shut off, the intake valves are closed. So this just maintains the momentum of the car. Or if you're in a traffic jam, when you're just crawling along, you don't need to burn enough fuel, you don't need to burn that much fuel to run all the 4 cylinders. So that's another interesting feature of this Evo engine. And finally, it also has a variable geometry turbo. And now what that is basically this system can alter the amount of boost that is produced by the turbocharger, and that again helps deliver power and efficiency. And why is this important? Well, in a naturally aspirated engine, in the suction stroke, when the piston is going down in the cylinder, speaking of the ACC, now you can see that it's automatically braking, and it does it really, again, unintrusively. And when I change lanes, it accelerates again because it notices that the car in front of me is already pulled away. So pretty good. Anyway, back to what I was telling. So the naturally aspirated engines during the suction stroke draw the air in at atmospheric pressure. This is all good because it lets the engine rev really high. But the problem with this system is at times there isn't enough oxygen in the fuel air mixture, which is just coming in at atmospheric pressure, and because of that you don't burn all the fuel fully. That results in using up more fuel as well as getting less power. So in this case you have a forced induction system. So a turbocharger or a supercharger basically compresses the air into the cylinder. Now this helps maintain a higher burning of the fuel, and you get to use all of the energy that's stored in the fuel. But the problem with turbochargers is that at low RPMs they don't generate enough boost, and at high RPM they generate too much boost, which can lead to premature ignition of the fuel. So a variable geometry turbo like the one in this engine can actually alter the geometry of the vanes of the turbine, and then alter the amount of boost that's produced. So it produces more boost at low RPM and less boost at high RPM. Hope that you guys understood that. That was a little mechanics lesson from AJ. If I got it wrong or I messed something out, put it down in the comments and then we can talk about it. But apart from that, this engine has enough poke, and honestly, 150 horsepower for a car of this size, you can really have a lot of fun with it, because the engine has really good low down grunt. It sounds pretty good as well when you're going around country roads. We'll show you that in a bit. So overall, this engine is a good match. Of course, if you plan to keep this car only in the city, then you really shouldn't go for this engine. Nor should you guys consider the 1.0 MPI engine, which doesn't have a turbocharger at all. I think that engine is, makes too little power. It's 75 horsepower. You're gonna always want more out of it. So spend that little bit extra. Either get the 1.0 TSI, the Eco TSI, which makes 115 horsepower. Later on in this year, you will be able to get that with a 7-speed DSG, if that's something that you would prefer. And this 1.5 kind of makes this car seem like a mini semi-Cupra, in fact, because there's plenty of power and the FR trim makes it look really sporty. And, well, yeah. Now let's take it out on some winding country roads and see how it does there. Now let's have some fun. We're on some nice twisty roads here in the hills of Spain. So let's put the car in sports mode. So we have the Seat drive profile, select sport. Now the throttle response is sharpened, the steering becomes a little bit heavier, and you get much better, much faster responses. If you've watched my videos earlier, you know that I generally complain about these MQB cars' steering feel. I complained about the Leon, I complained about the Octavia, I complained about the Ateca, because for me it just never felt real enough. It never had that, feedback that I've wanted. Mid-corner, you couldn't feel the tires loading up. You couldn't feel any changes in the feel in the steering wheel. It was just constantly the same throughout the corner. So I was always complaining. But I'm really happy to say this new system, or whatever they've done to this, is so much nicer because you get so much of feedback through the wheel. You can really feel what the tires are doing. And again, this 1.5 Evo engine definitely has the power to push you through the corner. I can't really push it too far on these roads because there's a lot of bicyclists, but trust me, I've been driving this car for about 100 kilometers today and I've tried it out already. It's really fun. The steering wheel, because it's a little bit smaller, it's really quick acting. Even though the rack itself is not necessarily a fast rack, there's still quite a lot of turns lock to lock. But for going around these kind of switchbacks, it's more than enough. This is so much fun. The throttle response in the sport mode is also heightened, so you can get an instant response like that. There's a motorcyclist behind me. Let me just let him pass. Or probably not. Anyway, he can stay behind us. Check out the brand new Ibiza. Maybe he'll like it. Or no, he wants to go. All right. But because of the wider track, there's a lot more grip now. And the longer wheelbase also makes it more planted around corners. It doesn't feel twitchy. The body is also really well controlled. So overall, FR feels really nice. Sometimes I do feel a little bit of torque steer. Now 150 horsepower is not enough to really induce a significant amount of torque steer, but it's there, slightly, once in a while. What is torque steer? Well, in a transverse mounted front wheel drive front engine layout, because the axis of the engine and the drive shafts are parallel to each other, the engine block and the transaxle, or the differential, have to be offset. So usually the engine is towards the right side of the engine bay and the transaxle is towards the left of the engine bay, or vice versa, doesn't really matter. But what that means is the final drive shafts on the axle going to the left and the right wheels are of different lengths. Now because of these different lengths, they have different torsional rigidities. So under heavy acceleration, the shorter beam and the longer beam twist to different angles or to different extents, and because of that, one wheel spins a little bit faster than the other, and this is the effect which induces the torque steer. So you can't really see it right now. It doesn't happen often, but it's there a little bit, but it's okay. It doesn't really matter, and honestly, having a little bit of torque steer is always fun because it again makes it quite engaging. Well, this road seems to be quite popular with motorcyclists and bicyclists, so have to be a little bit more careful. But yes, with a spirited, if you want to drive spirited, you can with the Ibiza, especially in the FR. You're going to have to wait a little bit to be able to order it with the 1.5 Evo engine. But if this is something that you want and you don't want to spend that much money on a Leon Cupra or something like that, and you don't really want to wait and see if and when the Ibiza gets a Cupra, then this is probably a good option for you to get right away. Let's just check for fun what is the mileage we're getting with in the sports mode. Right now it says we're getting 7.4 liters for 100 kilometers average consumption since start, which is a bit too high, I know, But if you're going to be driving like this in second gear at 50 to 80 and constantly braking, then it's really going to affect your average. But when we were driving earlier today, I did see numbers as low as 6, which is fairly acceptable for a 150 horsepower engine. But if you want something more economical, the 1.0 TSI is definitely the better bet. The all-new Seat Ibiza starts at around 13,000 euros, and that's for the reference trim, the base trim level, with the 1-liter MPI engine. But if you want one of the Eco TSI, the 3-cylinder turbo petrol engines, you're looking at something around 14,000 euros. But of course, there's an elaborate list of options, and the higher trims, like the FR or the Excellence that we have here today, starts at around 19,000 euros. And if you choose the the 1.5 Evo engine, that can go even higher. But I still think that this car does offer a really good value for money, because first of all, on the exterior, the design is so pleasing. It has the elements that we all have come to know and like about Seat, but because of the new platform, it sits much nicer on the road. And because of that, on the interior as well, there's so much more space than before. The plastics on the inside, on the dashboard and in other several places are still a bit hard, but I think you can forego that, because this is still going to undercut the VW Polo when that comes out. There's a lot more technology with the 8-inch touchscreen and better safety features like the assistance systems and the adaptive cruise control. And finally, the driving is much better as well. Thanks to the wider track and the longer wheelbase and the larger wheels, the car feels more planted than ever. So let us know, what do you feel about this car? And thanks for watching.